Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my dear friend and co-host, Jake LaQuire. We have a new intro for Purrfect Takes. So rolling out some new content for you all before the season gets going. And we had an eventful weekend. We went to the Panthers training camp on Sunday, and it was really insightful seeing kind of the play designs and the different drills the players were doing. Some are always fun, especially when they bring out the rings and are kind of like speed drills off the line, whether it's for edge rushers or wide receivers. It was a lot of fun. So what were your kind of key takeaways, Jacob?
Well, first, I love the intro. It pumped me up. Like sometimes you're like, all right, it's middle of the day, whatever, but it's really lively and active, gets you ready to record. And as far as training camp goes, I really wanted to see the new kickoff stuff. Obviously, they didn't show that because I guess they don't want to have people filming it or anything. But I kind of enjoyed the team portions, like 11-on-11, 7-on-7. Liked seeing guys like Deontay Johnson and J.C. Horn match up, seeing guys like Mingo work around, seeing other receivers. Adam Thielen was actually routing up some of the second and third team corners and at his ripe old age of 34. So hopefully he still has some juice, some of what he showed last year. But it's really fun to always go to practice and see some of those matchups like that. You mentioned like the ring drill where players have to run around, grab the thing off the ground and drop it on the other side. Stuff like that's really fun. Xavier Legette did not practice. We were there Sunday, was it? Yeah. I think he's still nursing that foot. Yeah, it was a foot. But he's back at practice the past couple of days, so not concerned there. But really fun to be there. The atmosphere, I would say, it's not as like communal as it was at Wofford, but the bright side is that there's less brightness because we were underneath a covered seating area. It was in Charlotte. It wasn't in that little pit in Spartanburg, so it was about 20 degrees cooler. So really enjoyed my time watching this time. Didn't get sunburned or anything. So really fun to go. And hopefully we'll be able to catch another one. If not, we are certainly ready for the rest of preseason and the season.
Yeah, no, I believe have the joint practice with the Jets later on this week. So that should be exciting. There's no confirmation of whether or not Legette will be active in those practices, as like you said, he is nursing that injury. And it's really just about getting him not only healthy, but then up to speed in the offense. And a guy that has kind of taken that third wide receiver role while Legette is developing is Jonathan Mingo, and the work he was putting in, both in the team drills and then almost it felt like he was doing individual drills by himself, and then even working with Bryce Young to develop a rapport and continue to get better as a wide receiver. And that's always great to see a second-year player who had an uninspiring rookie season to really kind of take that step and take a leap that it looks like he's doing. So that was awesome to see. The one thing, and Panthers Twitter has definitely been active when talking about this, is where are the deep balls? Where are those deep shots? And some of the one-on-one drills, it felt like there was one to Deontay Johnson and one to Adam Thielen where it felt like the wide receivers were almost having to slow down a little bit for the pass. And then when it was team drills, there was a deep shot down the left side. And Deontay Johnson might have been able to lay out for it, and he would in a real game situation, but it wasn't on the money. And so continuing the work on that and building timing on those deeper routes are going to increase more explosive plays. And having a guy like Legette who can win contested catch balls, I think is going to be key, especially on the perimeter when we're trying to push the ball downfield.
Yeah, for sure. We really missed that like deep third element of the passing game this past season. My concern really isn't with the link up between Bryce and the receivers. It's more so, can our O-line hold up more than the 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, maybe that 3 seconds needed to go downfield on those play action shots. It remains to be seen for me still. The D-line was giving him fits the time we were there. I do believe Damian Lewis wasn't practicing, so still wasn't the full 5 together. And there were a couple of bad snaps from Austin Corbett, but hopefully we can get that cleaned up. But for me, the O-line still is a concern. I said it when we signed the guys, just because they are being paid top dollar doesn't mean that they're top tier offensive lineman guards at those positions. So hopefully we're able to be more cohesive this season than last season. That's still the number one concern for me. But overall, I thought I took a lot of positives away from practice. And speaking of the D-line, this was a position where we thought there might not be enough juice, especially on the edges. But Clowney looked really good. Kalavon Chason, who we signed in the offseason, looked really good. in the preseason game, both DJ Johnson, I think he was the 3rd round pick from last year. Yeah, it was 3rd round. Yeah, he was really good in setting the edge. And Eku Leota, I believe is how you say it. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. He was phenomenal in that preseason game versus the New England Patriots. Just getting into the backfield, wreaking havoc, generating pressures. He had a sack. He was good in the run game as well. He's a guy that, like, for a team looking for pass rush help, for edge rusher help, he's certainly a guy that could make the 53 man roster that's going to come down here in a couple of weeks once it's cut day. And talking about that preseason game, I'm not super concerned with the outcome or anything that happened there. The quarterback that we had in there, Plummer from Louisville, did not put his best foot forward, and it was pouring rain. So I'm not super concerned with the drops that were there, the lapses in pressure and stuff of that nature. I'm not super concerned. I thought the defense played well given the amount of people we had available. But you also have to remember, I think we had 31 or 32 players not playing. So starters didn't play and like key depth didn't play. So people freaking out about, oh, we didn't play Bryce Young in the preseason. All these rookie QBs are playing. We didn't play this player, that player. Oh, we lost 17-3. That doesn't matter one bit to me. If none of our starters play at all in the preseason, then that might be a bit of a concern. But we still have 2 more games coming up. We have the Jets, like you were talking about. They'll be in town for the joint practices, and then we'll host them here. Similar to last season, we had them here, and then they I think there was like a rainy practice where they didn't practice the second day. Then we had the preseason game. And then we travel up to Buffalo, I believe, for our final preseason game, see the Panthers North contingency there. So hopefully some of the stuff that a lot of fans are worried about gets taken care of with those 2 games. But this past, it wasn't the weekend, this past week's game, not super concerned whatsoever.
No, it's the first preseason game. And what was cool was seeing elements and layers within some of the play designs that we even saw when we went to practice. So for those who watched the game, there was a handoff to Mingo and talks about, hey, if you had Amir Smith-Marset there or Leggett, where it's you have some top end speed or elite agility playmakers there that you can break some of these bigger ones on handoffs. But the one thing I was actually curious about, and that was looking at how effective the Buccaneers and the Panthers were last year in shotgun. And the reason why I emphasize the Buccaneers is because that's where Dave Canales comes from. So when looking at that efficiency-wise, the Buccaneers were above average when passing in shotgun. And they were about league average when running the ball from shotgun. So those 2 things indicate to me that Dave Canales did a good job of blending the pass and run when a offense is in shotgun. When you look at pass over expectation when a team is in shotgun, the Buccaneers ranked 23rd, the Panthers ranked 28th. The success rate, the Buccaneers were a little bit low last year despite the better EPA numbers, and they ranked about 23rd there, and the Panthers ranked 31st. So getting a boost not only in cohesiveness and blending the pass and the run, but improving your efficiency when you're in shotgun is something that I believe the Panthers are working on. What we saw when we went down the training camp is Jordan Matthews was acting as kind of the tight end 1 role with the number ones, taking reps with kind of the first team. And he would motion on a lot of these shotgun snaps and kind of like a pre-snap motion. And what it allowed is he would be a lead blocker in the case of a run or a handoff, or he could be the first outlet, kind of first read on a drop back. And so that was very interesting to kind of see the layer where you can put a defense in a bind based on kind of the look they're giving you on a play-to-play basis. So that was insightful to see. I think we should see an improvement when we take snaps out of shotgun this year, this fall. I think a large part of that is Dave Canales in the offense he is kind of bringing to Carolina.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other big thing that tight end motion does, sometimes he would motion all the way across, sometimes it'd be like underneath the tackle and back. It kind of helps key in on a certain player that the quarterback and the O-line are reading, like a linebacker, for instance, like, okay, what is this linebacker doing to match this motion? Is he going with it? Is he staying? That kind of gives them insight to what kind of defense they're up against that play. And it's really going to help them pre-snap and post-snap in terms of processing and decision-making, something that I think we all want to see improve from Bryce this year. And another thing I wanted to mention before we move on to the NFC West today is we saw mainly shotgun really for the Panthers last year underneath Frank Reich's scheme. A lot of shotgun, very little pistol, very little under center. I think we're going to see a little bit more of that this season. I know it's primarily like a drop back passing league nowadays, but I think you can operate play action a lot better under center, especially when a guy like Jonathan Brooks comes back. So I'm looking forward to seeing more variation in the style of offensive lineup, as well as variation in the personnel, which is something we were begging for last year, particularly when Frank Reich was the head decision maker. I think back to like those week 1 and 2 episodes that we did, or like, it would be week 2 and 3 because it'd be after the weeks 1 and 2 games, where you had the graphic there of the snap counts, and it was the same 3 receivers, the same tight end. So I think with guys like Jordan Matthews, who's a veteran in this league, but he seems to be sticking around here. I think with guys like that, with the versatility of skill sets, we're going to see different personnel groupings and actual personnel and different alignments, which is in and of itself a huge step forward for the offense, regardless of how I guess efficient you might measure it, just because there was no variation like that last year. So I'm looking forward to that this fall, particularly week 1 versus the Saints, who they used to be a stout defense. They've been known as a stout defense, but I think they're taking a step back there. It should be a really good opportunity to show off what Canales is able to scheme up and what he can do.
Yeah, and the Saints are known to be a man-heavy team, so it will be very interesting to see that if they play some zone, if we're able to get Deontay Johnson the ball, who is a great man beater, there'll be different layers and play designs with that particular game plan. Just kind of to harp on the shotgun numbers, the Panthers ranked 3rd in snaps in shotgun last year. The Buccaneers ranked 14th. So getting to those league average numbers would be perfect, where it is a blend where, hey, we're in shotgun for about X amount of plays and we're under center for X amount of plays. And I completely understand last year when you're down in so many games, you're going to be trying to play catch up, and you do that mainly in shotgun. So just having a balanced approach, being able to play complementary football is definitely going to be a key this fall. And I think those installs are in place and should lead to good results this coming fall. So enough about the Panthers. We've probably spent the longest amount of time on the Panthers for quite some time now, because we've been doing division breakdowns. And this week we have the NFC West. So we'll be looking at the team that the Kansas City Chiefs beat in the Super Bowl first, the San Francisco 49ers. They return a lot of the talent that they had in that Super Bowl run. What is keeping them from making another Super Bowl run, in your opinion, this fall?
Well, we'll have to see here, and maybe in a couple hours, a couple of days. I think the first one is if they lose a guy like Brandon Ayuk, and we've talked about this saga for probably the greater part of a month or two now. He seems to be 1 foot, maybe both feet out the door, and they just haven't told us yet that he's on his way to Pittsburgh. I think he was a huge part of their offense. I personally think he was the better receiver between him and Debo. Granted, Debo can do a bit more with his running ability and motion and stuff like that, but he's a super important guy. He was all pro this year. I think we both had him as a top 5 receiver moving forward. So that's a huge loss there. Another one, Eric Armstead. This is a guy that along the interior was a really good run defender and played a lot of run stop snaps for them last year. He's gone. Javon Kinlaw, who was one of the interior defensive line rotations, he's gone. Chase Young's gone. Randy Gregory's gone. They've lost a ton along that defensive line as well. And granted, they've tried to bring in guys to help mitigate that loss, like Yetur Gross-Matos. I know we should know who his name is. He was a Panther for 4 years. Leonard Floyd, who's on the back half of his career, and Malik Collins also on the back half of his career. I don't know if those kind of guys adequately fill in the roles of the people that are being jettisoned this offseason. So that would be concern number 2. Or that's actually concern number 1 for me, but losing Ayuk is another big one. That's mitigated less because they drafted 2 rookie receivers and seem to be in the rumor mill in the running for adding another receiver post the Ayuk trade. Like, people have linked Devontae Adams to him. I don't know why the Raiders would want to trade Devontae Adams, but that's up in the air. For me, it starts with that defensive front, because Steve Wilkes got scapegoated last year and the defense was blamed. And if the defense doesn't improve with the in-house play caller, I can't think of his name, who's the new defensive coordinator, I think the defensive line is going to be a big reason for that. Also, the injuries to Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw are going to play a part. But if that front isn't as dominant, it's going to be a big reason why the Niners don't win 14 games or whatever they're projected. I think they're projected to be favored in every game right now. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But if that defensive line isn't dominant, it might get a little dicey for them.
Yeah, that is a huge concern because teams ran on them a lot last year, and you just wonder, you lose Eric Armstead, you lose Randy Gregory and Chase Young, some of these guys that have a lot of experience in the league. And even though Chase Young never really quite lived up to his draft pedigree, he's still a really good edge player. And you wonder if you're going to get any value from your defensive line the way it's constructed right now. And that's just the state of reality on the defensive side of the ball. To your point, they hired, like you said, internally, Nick Sorensen. He was their defensive kind of passing coordinator the past couple of years. And you just wonder if, yes, he is Kyle Shanahan's dude. Is he going to be able to muster anything more out of this defense than what we've seen? Or are they going to continue the regress from what we've seen D'Amico Ryans 2 years ago and then Steve Wilkes last year? And if that's the case, okay, the defense got worse. Let's turn our attention to the offensive side. And that has some glaring questions, in my opinion. The offensive line was not necessarily good last year. And when you look at just how the roster is constructed, last year, according to FTN, the adjusted games lost due to injury, the 49ers ranked fourth, and fourth in a good way. They lost the least amount of games from that perspective. There were only 3 teams who lost less games. And when you stay healthy, that's what propelled that Super Bowl run. When we saw Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel out for a 3-game stretch, they lost all 3 games. Their offense looked average. This did not look like a Super Bowl contender, the juggernaut that we've seen the 49ers when they're all healthy. And that should be a big concern because Christian McCaffrey does have an injury history. He's getting older. He's on the cover of Madden. You have to deal with the Madden curse. George Kittle, he has also had an injury history. Same with Deebo Samuel. Trent Williams is getting older. And so you wonder, okay, if you have to put more on the shoulders of Brock Purdy, who is supposedly going to demand a $60 million contract next offseason, then he's got to be able to step up. And if he doesn't step up, to me, this is a team due for regression. And a lot of that has to do with, and Tyler Webb with Sleeper, I want to give him kind of credit here. For those who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to kind of see that the 49ers have the oldest roster right now in the NFL. And the other 3 teams in the NFC West are all at the NFL average or below. So when you have an aging roster that, yes, has a bunch of superstars, has a bunch of blue chip players, what are you going to do when they go down? Because this isn't a team with a lot of depth right now. And that concerns me. So I am not super high on the 49ers. I understand the market sees them high. I understand when they are healthy, they are a very tough team to play. But it's just too many questions at this point for me to just crown them like I have the Eagles and the Packers and even the Lions to an extent when we broke down the NFC North as being kind of the best of the best in the NFC.
You talk about Trent Williams getting up there in age. He's also not with the team right now. As of this recording, he wants a new contract. He's in the last year of his deal. He's one of the best, if not the best, left tackles in the league. So I got to think that the Niners will acquiesce to that. But then that brings up more money concerns like you're talking about. In the future, how much is Purdy going to make? They're already, we assume they're already losing Brandon Ayuk because of this. So I think the cap crunch, so to speak, is going to catch up to them there rather soon. And yeah, this is a super old team. If you look at this graphic here, Niners are almost 2 years older than the Green Bay Packers, who I think we can both agree are a really good and surging team in the NFC. And like you talked about, you picked them to win the division. I have them just behind the Lions. I think they're really good. And I think if the 49ers, can't capitalize this year while they still have most of these guys, again, assuming Ayuk's gone, while they still have most of these guys, I think it will go downhill in the future. However, this year, I am pretty high on them. I think they're going to win the division again. To me, the talent gap is just their best players when everyone's healthy. That talent gap is just so much above everyone else in the division that I think they have the edge there. Going back to the defensive side of the ball, I'm looking at their corner room and their defensive back room. I'm also quite concerned about who that second corner opposite Charvarius Ward is going to be. Is it going to be Isaac Yiadom, who is a free agent from the Saints? Rock Yassin, who's been kind of up and down throughout his career. And then Diamador Lenore, who I know they like as a nickel corner. Not sure if he's going to be really super built to play on the outside there. A lot of questions about the defense for me and quite a few about the offense for you. That certainly, when you combine those, doesn't lead to an image of a team that was favored in every single game last year, is favored to win the NFC West and the NFC in general. But the market seems to be rather high on them, as you have listed in this graphic here. Your adjusted win, projected improvement and regression model here. Seems that the market's really high on the Niners, but that might just be I guess recency bias from last season, or not digging deep enough to see the holes in the roster. But I think it is kind of murky for them going forward, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and I know you can't necessarily make assumptions or try to predict injury. That's a really just kind of murky area when it comes to kind of predicting. But if there's going to be some regression to the mean, say they aren't fourth, say they're 10th, say that some of ththese key contributors miss large portions of the season, that could hurt not only a playoff run, but it could impact their seeding to where maybe they do win their division, kind of like you think that they're still the favorite and going to do that. But they don't have a bye. They have to go on the road to Philadelphia or Detroit. And some of those places are very rowdy, and they have a home field advantage in and of those stadiums. So that being said, I don't see them being just this world beater team that they were last year. And I think that's going to come to a head this fall. We'll see if it happens early in the season or if it's something that the wheels just start falling off as the season goes along. But I expect teams, especially in their own division, to take advantage of a weaker defensive line, play ball control, run the ball well, and force Brock Purdy to be special down in and down out, because he now plays in a division with a guy that made I wouldn't say a mockery, but was really able to just kind of unpeel this offense and unreel it a little bit on Christmas. And that's Mike McDonald with the Seattle Seahawks now. And I know I'm jumping ahead a team, but it's more one of those things that you play them. Sean McVay is always a tough play, even though the 49ers, I think, have won X amount of the last.
It's like 6 out of the last 8 or something like that.
Yeah. And I don't want to take anything away from that. Kyle Shanahan obviously has an edge there, but the Rams are trying to improve the best way they can. The Cardinals, I think, added a lot on offense, and you never know that they could be kind of that pesky team that wins a game or two. And playing in your own division, 6 of your games, pretty much a third of your regular season, is going to be against tough competition. And then you play the number 1 seeds across the conference. You play like good competition in the NFL. And I'm not exactly sold on them being the team. I'm rambling at this point, but I think this is a good segue to go from the 49ers, who are a super, super old team, to a team that has a lot of youth, that is well coached, and is trying to kind of repeat the success that they found last year. And that's the Los Angeles Rams. And so Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, a solid offensive line. You draft Blake Corum, the pair with Kyron Williams. This offense seems pretty decent and has the potential to be top 10, maybe even top 5 this year. My concerns, kind of like with the 49ers for you, are on the defensive side, especially with the loss of future Hall of Famer Aaron Donald.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the point that you made there towards the end is that the Niners aren't untouchable right now. Last year, it was pretty clear nobody in the division could really even grasp at them. This season, I think it's catching up to them. And as far as floor and ceiling goes, I know we kind of skipped past that part. I think their ceiling is a Super Bowl. We've seen them get there. We've seen them get to the NFC Championship, I think 3 out of the last 5 years. So really good team there. But I think another team could lap them, and that could be their floor. Another team in the division could take that crown. But the concerns about the Rams, for me, you're talking about the defense. I'm more concerned about the offense, and it's for a similar reason. We talked about we don't want to predict injuries or try to project them or anything. But coming out of camp, 3 of their starting 5 offensive linemen seem to be injured. We know that Kyron Williams dealt with a little bit of stuff last year. Stafford's on the wrong side of 30 or wrong side of 35 rather. And he just 2 years ago had I think it was his elbow, right? Or was it elbow or thumb? He's had a ton of like arm and hand injuries throughout his career, but 2 years ago it was the elbow. I'm concerned about, is the offense going to be healthy enough to compete? Because if they are, I think this could be a top 5 offense. I'm really high on them there. But I think you highlighted it well. How are they going to replace the best defensive player of this generation? And I think that's the number one question that this team has.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. I want to touch on kind of the offensive concerns. I brought up the fact that the 49ers were a very healthy team, kind of ranking 4th in the league. The team at number 1 were the Los Angeles Rams. And I kind of want to do a rewind, because last year when we talked about this division, we saw how barren this roster was. We also knew kind of the fragility of the San Francisco 49ers, and we counted on injuries kind of being a factor last year, and they weren't. And so they hit kind of those ceiling thresholds for both of their potential outcomes. This year, with Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, like you said, some of their offensive line already kind of dealing with nagging injuries this offseason, does not bode well if some of those guys go down. And if they lose some of the interior pieces that they have that are really the bedrock of this team, Sean McVay has been able to, with Matthew Stafford, transform this Shanahan style offense into a much more drop back traditional look, to where he can marry the run and pass looks under center and really just play bully ball at the line of scrimmage. And so if you aren't able to play bully ball, is Matthew Stafford going to be able to stay upright to deliver passes downfield to some of the playmakers that are on this team? And that's a concerning factor. I think this offense, at the very least, will be average in the NFL. But when you got to carry the defensive side of the ball that is trying to replace Aaron Donald with rookies and Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and their second-year player that they drafted last year, Byron Young, you just worry that, do they have enough on the defensive side, not only on the defensive line, but on the back end? So I know you're a little bit more higher on them adding Darius Williams, Trey White, adding Cameron Curl from Washington in free agency, but I'm not really sold on this unit, especially with not only losing Aaron Donald, but Raheem Morris, their defensive coordinator, who I thought was an absolute genius in kind of developing a bend, don't break approach with playing a lot of cover 4 shells, allowing offenses to kind of move the ball methodically downfield, but not allowing big explosive plays. And so we're going to have to see with their new defensive coordinator if they're able to kind of continue to do what they did last year, which helped them get to 10-7 and make the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's the other big one, right? Other than Donald, is the loss of Raheem Morris. I think Raheem Morris did a very, very good job with that defense last year. Going back to the rewind you're talking about, our big concern with the Rams was, okay, it's Aaron Donald and who else, right? Yeah. Well, the who else ended up being a lot of young players, Kobe Turner, the interior guy, Byron Young that you mentioned, and Raheem Morris got the most out of them. And now this season, I kind of see an opposite approach. They used their first and second round picks on the FSU D linemen and Verse and Fisk, like you talked about. Bring in Darius Williams, who's been there before, Cameron Curl from Washington, Trey White, Cam Kitchens, another rookie safety. They're bringing in people on defense, but they don't have Raheem Morris coordinating them, nor Aaron Donald's presence kind of bailing them out. Kobe Turner led rookies in sacks last year, but he was playing next to Aaron Donald. So I know a lot of
double teams.
Yeah, a lot of other NFL podcasters are talking about that. Yeah, he's getting at least an extra arm on him every single play now because you don't have Aaron Donald there. And is that going to impact him? Is that going to impact Fiske, who they traded up for with us? Thank you for your second-round pick this upcoming draft, Los Angeles Rams. But are they going to be able to produce in the aggregate what Aaron Donald's able to do? Number one, no, they aren't, because Aaron Donald's generational. I think the fact that opposing teams had to plan for Aaron Donald is something that's going to get overlooked now, because now they're going to be like, all right, we don't have to donate 3 offensive linemen per play to this guy. We can run our offense how we want to. How are the Rams going to respond on defense? That's a big question for me. Even with the additions that they have, is it going to be enough? I'm not sure. I think we talked about how the Niners are fading a little bit and the other teams are catching up. It's not like the Seahawks were super far behind them this past year, but I think the additions with the Seahawks and even the Cardinals kind of give them a leg up in terms of offseason improvement. So I wonder if the Rams also are going to regress a little bit as far as division standings go this upcoming season.
Yeah, and it was an interview with Part of My Take. Sean McVay kind of alluded to the fact that Aaron Donald has talked about missing playing football. And I'm sure the guy is still in phenomenal shape, where if he somehow came back in the next few weeks and was like, I'm going to play this year, maybe the Rams have a case to be right back in it. But again, being the healthiest team last year, a year after being one of the most injury-riddled teams, is just not something I'm going to bank on. I think there's going to be some regression to the mean. I don't think when we talk about ceiling and floor for this team, I think ceiling is exactly kind of where they were last year. Wild card, maybe a divisional round appearance. This is a team that is not loaded with enough talent to compete with the likes of the 49ers if they're healthy, the Philadelphia Eagles, I would even argue the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys took them to the woodshed last year in the regular season. The Lions, the Packers, like all these teams that are going to be contending in the NFC, they just don't have the firepower to keep up, in my opinion. The floor for this team, I think, is what it was 2 years ago, where they could be right back in the picking in the top 10. This year, they'll have their first round pick, but we'll have their second round pick as the Carolina Panthers. So I'm all here for it. That to me is just, I think they have the widest distribution of outcomes this year in this division. And it's just, it's disheartening to see because Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, they're such likable people. They put on a show. They know what they're doing, but it's just too many questions, just like I had with the San Francisco 49ers, for me to put a lot of faith in this team.
Yeah, now I know why you have the Rams so low in your rankings in the notes, because that Panthers second-round pick there. But you talk about them being the most healthy team in the league last season. That's with Cooper Kupp missing, the first 6 to 8 weeks, I believe. He was out. That was
the offensive line, the running back room, the defense. I mean, you got to
that's my point, is that they were remarkably healthy in spite of them at the time not having their number one receiver, a guy who had won a Triple Crown a couple years ago. So I do think they're due for regression in that regard as well. I agree with you. I think their ceiling is right around where they were last year, right? If you expect offensive improvement and a little bit of defensive improvement, you have to offset that with the loss of Aaron Donald and the loss of Raheem Morris. So I think a 10-7-ish ceiling seems about right. Maybe making the wild card round. I don't think they have enough juice to get past a lot of the teams you mentioned. Teams like the Lions, the Packers, even the Niners are kind of like juggernauts in the NFC. The Eagles as well. I think the Eagles have a really good roster too. So it's going to be hard for them to win a playoff game, but I'm never going to bet against McVay in terms of needing to get a one-game script written up really well. I do think their floor is pretty low, like you're talking about. This was a team that last year we thought, I think both of us had projected to pick in the top 6 or something like that. If they bottom out again, like you're talking about, I think we can find them right back there. So for me, I think the median outcome is really missing maybe being on that bubble, missing the playoffs. But I do think they have a wide range, and it sucks to see because the Rams are super fun to watch with Stafford and McVay, but I just don't think they have enough juice to get there this year after losing the important pieces that they did or that they had last year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for me, the team that is going to pass them, even though they finished just behind them last year, are the Seattle Seahawks. And a big reason for that is that their rank in EPA on defense was 30th in the league last year. Yeah. And Pete Carroll, he's in his 70s. We saw Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, both kind of on the brink and pretty much done with their careers now that they're 70 plus. And so you bring in a guy that's half his age in Mike McDonald, the Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator, who really put the brakes on so many explosive offenses last year. The San Francisco 49ers being a prime example on Christmas Day. And for me, what they're doing in drafting Byron Murphy, getting Uchenna Nwosu back from injury, the extension of Leonard Williams, the fact that they have some other pieces in Boye Mafe and Derek Hall, and bringing in some other key depth pieces in free agency is huge. And the fact that Jerome Baker is kind of the linebacker that he wants to start building this linebacking core around, with a back end that includes Tyreek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon. To me, I feel like Mike Macdonald's going to be in his bag, and he's going to whip something up this offseason defensively that is going to put this group into probably, like, I would say, like above average category on defense. And then you pair that with a offense that was top 10 last year. I think you have something to be excited about. This is a team that can get frisky, that can answer a lot of questions on both sides of the ball. And the fact that they are so deep, I think, on the offensive side in terms of receiving options with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Noah Fant, the fact that you have a Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet coming out of the backfield, Geno Smith, who has looked phenomenal since becoming the starter a couple of years ago. It seems like it's the right time for everything to click into place. And we talk about that there's been a couple rookie coaches that have kind of taken the league by storm each year. Brian Dable a couple years ago. I'm blanking out on a first-year guy.
D'Amico Ryans.
Yep, D'Amico
Jane
Ryans
Steichen as well.
Yeah, and so when you look at some of those guys each and every year, for me, it feels like Mike Macdonald, he was phenomenal at what he did. He comes from a great culture. He still has John Schneider as the GM in Seattle. Pete Carroll is still a senior kind of assistant, a ear, so to speak, in that locker room, in that building. I think this team is going nowhere but up, and I'm really excited to see where Ryan Grubb takes this offense.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I want to start on the defense as well. You talked about what Macdonald was able to do last year to a lot of teams. You know what a lot of those teams had in common, or the ones that like stand out have in common? They were all NFC teams, right?
Yep.
He shut down the high-powered Lions. He shut down the Niners. Didn't really shut down the Rams, but they did beat them. I'm thinking the Seahawks as well, they shut down. And obviously the Cardinals. He has experience playing against those teams. And I think for a team that is looking to be in the playoffs sooner rather than later, that experience, his scheme is going to come in hand when you're playing against exclusively NFC teams, right? And like in the first couple rounds of the playoffs until you have to go play Mahomes at the end. But I do think the talent on this defense isn't the same level that it was on the Ravens as far as the middle of that defense, the spine, their like safety linebacker, main interior guy. I do think it's maybe another year away from being that elite defense, but they have the right pieces in place like you're talking about. Leonard Williams was excellent last year. He should also be really good against the run. I'm really excited about Byron Murphy, the interior guy that they added. I had him as the best interior defense. I think I had him as the best overall defender. I'll have to go back and look at that. Really, really explosive player there. The edge room is, I would say, pretty average with Mafe and Nwosu, but they're fun pieces there. To me, the stars of their defense, or the main star, is going to be Devin Witherspoon. This is a guy that you love, you're super high on. He's going to be what I guess the Seahawks version of Kyle Hamilton can be. He's not as big as Hamilton. He's not going to be able to come down and thump as much, I don't think. But the way they're going to be able to use him, I guess in terms of multiplicity, like moving him across the field, having him come down when necessary, I think he's going to be that key piece along the back end. I just think they're going to need one more offseason to get the rest of their guys in there. But that's okay because, like you're talking about, the offense should get better, I think, under Ryan Grubb, who was the coordinator of the Washington Huskies, who went to the college football national championship. Obviously, threw up a stinker against Michigan, but Michigan had the best defense in the country last year. I think what he's going to be able to do is really interesting because his offense was more of a pro-style offense. It wasn't a Chip Kelly scheme, which was all RPOs and stuff like that. I think what he's going to be able to do with Geno Smith is going to be similar to what he did with Michael Penix with Washington this past year. Now, I think the receiver talent was a bit of a downgrade in terms of relativity. Obviously, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan is an otherworldly trio in college football, but DK Metcalf is really good. He's going to be a good outside the numbers guy, good like box out big guy. Tyler Lockett, I still think he has the juice on those deep balls, and Geno Smith is like the best deep ball thrower in the league now after his career renaissance there. I know some people call it the Geno-sance on Twitter, some of the Seahawks fans. And then I think what Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be able to do in year two should mesh really well with both of those guys because primarily a slot guy in college, right? And if he's going to stay there, well, he has two established outside receivers in Metcalf and in Lockett. I also like the running back tandem that they have in Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet. You know, I was really high on Charbonnet a couple years ago. For me, the question is the offensive line. both of their young tackles have been better than expected, I think, although Lucas took a step back last year. That interior needs to get better because I think the interior pressure was what derailed Washington when they had a little bit of difficulty throughout the season and in the national championship, because those Michigan D linemen are pretty crazy. Both of them will be first-round picks this year. Throw that early perfect take out there for draft season. But the interior of the Seahawks offensive line needs to get a lot better. We saw them try to improve it. They brought in Laken Tomlinson, but I don't think that's going to be enough for them this year. I think that they're going to be better in terms of efficiency on offense. Their defense should be better, but I think in 2 years is when that leap is really going to happen. They're going to be maybe the division winner, maybe make some noise on a deep playoff run. But for now, I think they are going to be marginally better on both sides of the ball. And I wouldn't put it past them if they make a lot of noise throughout the regular season and sneak into that wild card as the 6th or 7th team.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely see kind of how they fall in the NFC standings. I'm a little bit higher, and we'll get more into that when we talk about the division standings as we wrap up the episode. But for me, I want to go back to the defensive side, kind of go linearly through the points that you were making. And you brought up the fact that the Rams kind of toasted this Mike McDonald defense. And it goes back to what we talked about with the Rams. They run a very traditional style offense, and Matthew Stafford makes big boy throws. He makes throws that guys like Brock Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa, some of the Jared Goff can't make. And so when you can't scheme guys up in the middle of the field and you're able to kind of clutter and mess and murk that up, that creates an avenue to where there's going to be disaster. And we saw that in each of those games where the Ravens defense completely controlled the narrative throughout all of those. But when you're able to play a quarterback who can make big-time throws and big-time moments, that is always going to be hard to cover against. And that's why it's hard to bet against the Rams and why I feel like they have such a wide distribution of outcomes this fall. So,
but real quick, that's one of the worries for me about the Seahawks defense, though, is particularly in that second level, they don't have Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen anymore. I think Smith's a top 2 linebacker. Queen certainly has his uses. I think he's above average. And for me, that's a big reason why it's going to take a little bit before this defense can take off. They also lose the safeties, Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams as well. They're both on the back end, but still established players there. So I think we need to pump the brakes just a bit on this defense becoming not on the same level as the Ravens, but they should improve. That they should be at least in that 10 to 20 range, up from 32, or I think they were 30th in the last 9 weeks. They were bad throughout the year. They should really improve there, but I think it's going to be a while before we see them make that leap like we saw the Ravens do this year. It also took the Ravens 2 years after McDonald got there to be a top 1, top 2 defense.
Absolutely. But if you can go from 30th to average, and I'm not exactly
that's an awesome jump
with what you're saying with Ryan Grubb. I'm a huge Shane Waldron fan. I love what he did in Seattle, especially when he had some tackle injury last year. And so my question for Ryan Grubb is if this offense stays healthy, I think it's going to look great. But if you have Abraham Lucas or Charles Cross go out for an injury, or you have Tyler Lockett go out, are you going to be able to have the answers? And I'm curious to see if Ryan Grubb is going to have them. Because if he doesn't, then this offense is going to stagnate a little bit. So that is my concern, is that even with those injuries to very key positions, the offense was a top 10 offense last year. And so if Ryan Grubb can at least just maintain that, the defense get to about above average, I think this team is a sneaky team to watch for in the NFC. I think it more so relates to the division title stakes rather than the NFC as a whole. I think for them to compete with the NFC as a whole with the big boys, you're exactly right. The defense is going to need another year of work, both through the offseason and additions through the draft and free agency. And the offense needs to improve the interior of their offensive line and probably get another pass catcher or two, with Tyler Lockett kind of being a year or two removed from, I think, really being a key contributor to an offense.
For sure. And I think that's a fair question to bring up in regards to Grubb and injuries. Looking at Washington, the Huskies last year, they had a really good offensive line. Both Troy Fautanu, I believe, went to the Steelers at 17 overall, so first-round pick, and Roger Rosengarten, who we talked about a couple weeks ago.
For the Ravens.
a couple weeks ago, went in the back end of the second round. So top 2 round tackles. Their center, Parker Brailsford at Alabama now. He was the number 1 center in the portal, so a good guy there. They had good guard play as well. And throughout most of the season, they stayed relatively healthy. Jalen McMillan, their slot receiver, was the only super key injury throughout the season. So it is a question, right? If the things fall apart like they did last year for that Seahawks offense, is Grubb going to be able to maintain it? I think that's a question we're going to have to wait and see answered, but that would be a concern for me as well. And I think that kind of leads us pretty well into the floor and ceiling of the team. I think we're talking about this team, if you can get that defense from 32 to 16, I think that's a conservative guess there, jump there, because just a change in scheme alone should get this team a lot better, not to mention the people they brought in. But if you can bring that defense up and keep the offense the same, this team should be better than they were last year, should be better than I think their counterpart in the Rams, like we're talking about, and should be able to easily contend for 2 in the division and maybe sneak into that wild card spot. I could also see this taking a couple years, right? If everybody, or if things fall apart on offense like we're talking about, if the defense takes more time to come along, if they go from 32 to, let's say, 22 this year, I could see the Seahawks missing the playoffs, hovering around that 500 range, 9-8, 8-9 range, something like that. But I do think the range of outcomes is pretty narrow for this team, between 10 to 8 wins or something like that, because I like a lot of what they have, and what they have is pretty established. I don't think there's going to be a ton of change overall, I guess. The change is going to come from the coaching staff, I think.
Yeah, and we're going to see how quickly they're able to install their schemes, how quickly the players are able to pick up on them. Are there easy buttons for both? I think that's the one thing that makes Mike Macdonald's defenses so lethal, is the terminology is very, very simple. It's, if this happens, you do this. And the play calls that come in, they're very simple, they're very short, and they're meant to, so that players can just react. There isn't, okay, I see this, then I got to watch for this, and then I got to watch for this again. That's how defenders get turned around. That's how they get almost it's those plays where it's oh, that defender had this player. No, the coverage rules got broken, and that defender got put in a blender. And that happens on so many accounts. And I think that's what makes McDonald so different, is that he keeps everybody on the same page, and he plays a very unique style of defense. So we'll see if that's able to hit the ground running. We'll see if Grubb is able to pick up where Shane Waldron left off. And that kind of leads into exactly what you're saying with the floor and ceiling is, I don't know if it's 8 to 10. I think it's 8 to 11. I really do think that this is 11-win team potentially, because they were 9-8 last year. And if the defense is able to really take a jump, I think that gets you a win or two. And that's really what puts them really in that contention, I think, not only for second in the division, but really arguably first. And so I'll touch more on that with my perfect take. My perfect take this week will center around the Seattle Seahawks. But I think this is a good segue into the last and final team that was pretty feisty last year. And I think this year has a chance to kind of make some noise. Again, I think they're still a year or two away from truly competing, not only in the NFC West, but the NFC as a whole. I think that's the Arizona Cardinals. And this offense started to kind of come into its own last year with Kyler Murray when he came back from injury. Gannon was doing some very creative things on the defensive side last year. And I think when you add talent to both sides of the ball this past offseason, you have a chance to take a step and stay competitive in games and actually win a game or two that you might not win last year, or might not have won in a different scenario in terms of marketing, betting odds. And at this point, I'm just rambling on again, but this is where I see the Cardinals as just being a sneaky, pesky team that can really, really stay in it with some of these heavy contenders.
And they were like that last year as well, like a feisty team, a pesky team, like you're saying, beat the Cowboys. They gave the Eagles fits at the end of the year. And so I think going from that to getting Kyler back, he looks healthy now. I'm the number one Kyler defender. It's funny, I didn't like him coming out of the draft, but ever since his rookie year, I've been a huge fan of him. I think he's going to be really good. Trey McBride is coming along as a young tight end. And I think the number one addition that we can agree upon was the number one player in college football last year, Marvin Harrison Jr., the Ohio State receiver. They drafted him instead of the QB, giving Kyler a vote of confidence. I never really understood that argument, considering they just paid Kyler a I guess, last offseason now. This is going to be an electric pairing, I think, if both are healthy. To me, Harrison Jr. was already like not multiple tiers, but at least one tier above even guys like Neighbors and Adunze, who are really, really good receivers in their own right. He's able to do everything. He's going to be able to unlock every area of the field. He can do jump balls. Like, there's just nothing he can't do. And I think adding a guy like Kyler, who's dynamic as a runner, moving out of the pocket and escaping, I think he's really good as well. I'm going to use my cursor, like getting out to like moving the pocket, moving along the pocket, and throwing downfield, kind of in a mini Mahomes-esque way. I think pairing that with a really strong run game, which they've had the past couple of years, especially with James Conner. They also added Trey Benson, who should be a bruiser for them this year. A little bit of offensive line upgrades as well. Jonah Williams, they drafted Isaiah Adams, I believe from Illinois. He's going to play guard as well. Paris Johnson, their pick from 2 years ago, moving to the left side, presumptively with DJ Humphries leaving. I think the offense has everything it needs to take a step, maybe 2 or 3 steps forward this year, provided Kyler stays healthy. Now, my main question about this team is on the defensive side of the ball, and I know Gannon was a really good defensive coordinator in Philly. Even if Philly fans don't want to agree, you saw what that got you by hating on Gannon and what happened last year. But the talent level on this defense, to me, is just not up to par. They lost B.J. Ojolari I think a week ago today, to a season-ending injury, a guy we were both really high on, their second-round edge rusher pick from last year. They did add an interior defensive lineman in the draft, Darius Robinson, in the first round. They also added some corners in later rounds. But I don't know. To me, the defense is another draft free agency away from being able to compete with an offense like the 49ers, an offense like Sean McVay and the Rams, an offense like Ryan Grubb and the Seattle Seahawks, who, even though there's a coordinator change, it might be a little better, might be a little worse. This was the 10th best offense overall in the league last year. I don't think this defense can keep up or stop any of those, as well as any of the other high-powered NFC offenses. But I do think this offense has what it takes to be able to hang in games like that and give them wins like you're talking about in some of the games where maybe they shouldn't be competitive in.
Yeah, no, and like we talked about, they were pesky. They won games they shouldn't last year, and that should only continue this year. I think Paris Johnson taking a step in his second year at left tackle, the fact that they went out and got Jonah Williams for that right side. He does have an injury history. His playing career has kind of been up and down, so that's not necessarily the thing I would hang my laurels on with this offense. It's the fact that I think they can get in the 12 personnel and really play bully ball. Like you said, this is a good rushing team in the past, and I think that only continues. They draft Trey Benson, the pair with James Conner, and both of them are going to hit you in your mouth. And that kind of rushing attack, and then pair that with some play action concepts where you're hitting Trey McBride, you're hitting Marvin Harrison, you're going outside to a Michael Wilson, second-year guy that showed some promise last year. I know Rondale Moore got shipped out for Desmond Shitter, but like they had Greg Dortch. And for me,
Dortch the torch.
And when I saw Greg Dortch a couple years ago, I was like, they're replacing Rondale Moore. Like Rondale Moore's, I wouldn't say expendable, but it was one of those things that if he asked for too much money, it's like, we already have a guy that plays a similar position, similar role in the slot. And so you can be in 11 personnel. You can be in 12 personnel. You could probably even get in the 13 personnel in some cases in point. And having Kyler's kind of magic in the pocket and having a good arm, having a big arm, so to speak, and get the ball downfield to Marvin Harrison is going to be huge for this offense. I think a lot of the questions are going to stem on defense. Can they continue to build on what they did last year? The talent they add through the draft and free agency, does that make a difference? Because if that doesn't make a difference and they stay kind of in that bottom third defensively, that's what's going to hold them back from really taking a step. And they can obviously address defense in next offseason in the draft and free agency, and there will be playmakers there. I think they'll definitely have the cap room to spend. So that's not something that has to be addressed immediately. I think it's just what's holding them back from competing in the NFC for like a true wild card spot.
Yeah, I'm with you there. You mentioned 12 personnel a lot. They added Tip Raymond as well in the draft, the Illinois tight end. So I think they are going to be a pretty run-heavy team, and they should be, right? Like you're talking about, they have the personnel to do it. And I think Kyler's running ability complements the two main running backs that we talk about pretty well. While they're the thumpers, he's a guy that can he can use his speed and elusiveness and really just get around you. He's like he's different from Cam Newton because Cam just fell on top of you and pushed you over. But like the 2-point play guy for me in the league right now is Kyler, because there's like a highlight every other week on Red Zone of him zipping around for 20 seconds and nobody's open. He's like, all right, I'll just run it in. And with guys like McBride, like Harrison Jr. there now, I think those goal line red zone plays are going to be even more deadly. But yeah, it's the defense. They still have Budda Baker, who we're a year removed from him. I think it was either a trade request or a reworked contract request. Obviously, they kept him. He seems bought in now with Gannon, and it's Drew Petzing, right, is the defensive coordinator there.
No, offense.
It's Rawless on defense, right?
Yep, Nick Rawless' defense. Yeah. Drew Petzing is the offensive coordinator.
Yes, I got those two mixed up, but he seems bought in now. But yeah, like you said, there's still another offseason plus away from getting the requisite talent, on that defensive side of the ball to be able to make a stand against these high-powered NFC offenses. Because we talked about the past couple of years, all the AFC's ruling the league. I think the offensive side in the NFC is going to be the new wave, so to speak, because got Lions, Packers, even Cowboys to an extent. The other three teams in the division, the Eagles, if Kellen Moore really takes off for them, they'll have to work out that Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni dispute that is being talked about. But all these offenses should be good, even the Falcons, if they're able to coalesce this year. So I think the defense is what's going to hold them back, but this offense should be fun, frisky, feisty, whatever you want to call it. As far as floor and ceiling goes, I don't think they're going to be making noise in the playoffs. I think that they are pretty firmly at the bottom of the division to me. But I could see them rattling off 6 or 7, maybe even 8 wins. They weren't supposed to win 4 games last year, and they did. So if they could continue to improve there, I could see that. But again, I could also see this being another top 3 pick team just because that defense isn't able to keep up with a lot of the stronger offenses around the league. And I think that having a top 3, top 5 pick wouldn't be the worst thing for this roster. This upcoming draft is going to be huge on defense. It's going to be like this past draft was on offense with all the receivers, QBs, everything. That's how it's going to be on defense this year with all the corners and edge rushers, which is a good thing for Panthers fans. But I think they're a year away on defense is the point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah, and you mentioned Budda Baker. They have Sean Murphy-Bunting in the secondary. They have Kaiser White and kind of that linebacking core. Those are like average players, so to speak, at kind of the second and third levels. And then on the defensive line, you have Zavon Collins, and you just drafted Darius Robinson out of Missouri, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so those two guys, you hopefully they're adequate enough. They're average starters. And at that point, you're relying on scheme. Like you said, you're looking towards next year to kind of really add talent, playmakers, difference makers that are really going to make an impact, kind of like a Marvin Harrison or a Trey McBride that they've been able to draft the past 2 years. I'm excited to see Kyler Murray with Marvin Harrison. It's giving off like the Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins from a couple years ago. And I think we'll see some really magical and special plays between those two for the next couple years. And I'm excited to see where it goes. So that kind of wraps it up. I agree with you on kind of floor and ceiling. I feel like it's similar to the Seahawks where they're almost like kind of a set window where it's like they're in a certain part of the team building process where we kind of know who they are and they're working on their identity. They're just not there yet from a talent standpoint. And we knew that when Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort kind of took over for the Cardinals last offseason, that this was going to be a rebuild. That this wasn't going to be immediate success from the kind of Cliff Kingsbury era prior. So I think it's that like almost 5-6 wins to about like 8. Maybe they could surprise and be that 9-8 team, kind of be like the Seahawks where they're frisky. The offense kind of carries them and the defense just holds at times to kind of keep them in games. So with that, I think the way the NFC West is going to shake out, and this is just my division rankings. This is kind of getting into the perfect take that's going to happen. I think the Seattle Seahawks win the division. This was the take I had last year when covering the division, and I'm doubling down on it because, again, I don't know if we can expect the 49ers and the Rams to stay as healthy as they were last year. I mean, those were two teams with injury-prone players staying top 5, like in terms of healthiness throughout the year. And that's a lot to put on the shoulders of an older roster for the 49ers. I still think they're a wild card team. They'll be in the playoffs. I really do think that's the 49ers floor. It's kind of like make the playoffs or make the Super Bowl. And it's really going to be dependent on Ayuk. Is he still with the team? Does this team stay healthy, their core players? And does the defense respond well with Nick Sorensen kind of taking the reins from Steve Wilkes? So we'll see how that plays out. But Seahawks at 1, 49ers at 2. And then shocker, surprising, I think the Cardinals finished third in the division, because I really do think, like last year, I thought the Rams were a bottom 5 team last year. I think when you lose a Hall of Fame player, when you already have some injuries that are kind of being prevalent in this training camp, that this team is going to kind of have the bottom fall out, and the Rams will take the bottom of the division at the end of 2024.
There's a lot of interesting arguments there, but they're good arguments, I think, in every stance. I think this is the first division we've done out of the 6 so far where we don't have any teams in the correct slots or matching slots.
Same slot, yeah.
Same slot there, yeah. So I have the Niners winning the division. I don't think that's a super hot take, and if I'm going to throw the market one back up there, if you believe in the market, I think the Niners are the heavy favorite there. To me, even if they can weather a 3-game stretch of no Trent Williams or a 4-game stretch of no McCaffrey or something like that, I think they're high in talent, and the coaching, as far as Shanahan goes, is still good enough to keep them number 1 in the division. But that's not to say that the Seahawks, who I have at 2, aren't nipping on their heels. I think the Seahawks will improve this year. Like you said, 9 wins last year, and it should only be up from here. But I really think in 2 years is when they're going to be the most dangerous. I have the Rams at 3rd because I learned my lesson. I'm never going to count Sean McVay out again. I just don't have them 2nd anymore because, like you said, Aaron Donald is irreplaceable. Until we see Kobe Turner rattle off 20 sacks next year, being double-teamed every play, he's irreplaceable. And to me, his loss and the loss of Raheem Morris are going to drag this team down. And like with the Niners, we should expect, I'm not saying that we want or we should prey on injuries, but we should expect some regression toward the mean, towards the average in the league in terms of games lost to injuries, because this was the healthiest team last year. And then at the bottom, I do have the feisty Cardinals, who I think are going to be better than people think on offense. And I'll get into my take here in a second. It's just, I don't think that defense can hold up against a lot of other teams in the league, but we are in perfect take territory now, and I said I'd get to it. My take is that Kyler is going to lead the Cardinals to a top 12 offense. They were already a strong rushing attack last year. Once he got back, they were an improved offense. I think he can bring them to just above league average, especially with the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr., who is as generational a receiver prospect as we've seen in quite some time. He's right up there with Jamar Chase. And we got to remember, Jamar Chase was during the COVID era. He sat out a year and was still a top 5 pick. And so I regard Harrison Jr. that highly. I also think Kyler might be the comeback player of the winter award. I didn't want to lump 2 takes together, so I chose the top 12 offense one, but wouldn't be surprised if he wins comeback player of the year. And he and the offense are going to be the reason why the Cardinals are fun to watch. They're going to be like, they might be this year's league pass team, so to speak. I don't know what the NFL equivalent of that is, but they should be fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that there are going to be spurts in that offense that are going to be extremely fun. We're going to see just how well this offense is able to just kind of keep moving the chains and having answers for different problems. I could see them definitely getting the points in games or stretches in the season where defenses kind of figure them out a little bit and they have to adjust. I think that's what makes a great play caller and will really put Drew Petzing to the test is, okay, when you face some of this adversity, when defenses are figuring out what you're doing and able to put the brakes on you, do you have a counter response? Do you have an answer? And that is what's really going to be determining whether or not this team takes a leap and wins more games. Obviously, like you said, impressed by winning 4 games last year with a talent devoid of roster. If they're able to even double that, that would be a huge success for this team and be a huge boost for them going into 2025. So my perfect take, like I said, is going to revolve around the Seattle Seahawks, who I have winning the division. And I think they sweep the 49ers. I think Mike McDonald is going to put clamps on how that offense operates. I think he has the talent on the perimeter to stop some of the wide receivers, and that'll allow him to have some of these safeties and linebackers work together to murk up the middle of the field for the 49ers and Brock Purdy. And we saw a lot of his prowess coming on some of these in-breaking routes across the middle, and we saw Kyle Hamilton pick off several of those passes. So whether that's Julian Love, maybe Devin Witherspoon being the Swiss Army knife he is, making plays against them. I think the simulated pressures that are going to come from Seattle with their defensive line and the talent is really going to put the brakes on this high-powered offense that we've been talking about throughout this episode. So I think that's how I see the cards falling out. I may be wrong like I was last year. The 49ers, despite me, will probably go 13-4 again and be right there in the NFC Championship Super Bowl conversation. So that about does it for us. Next week, we head to the AFC South, which has a lot of intriguing narratives, a lot of young quarterbacks that are trying to make their mark in the NFL. So that'll be fun to cover. We'll probably talk about the Panthers a little bit, their preseason game with the Jets, and kind of see if they've taken a step, if Bryce Young has a few reps in game, and how he fares against the Jets defense. So until next week, we'll catch you guys then.